Welcome everybody to Premier Research Labs webinar, specifically on our Premier Coffee that we just launched. And our subject matter expert today is Nathan Dodge, Research and Development Manager for Premier Research Labs. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi, Jenny. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Thanks for taking it. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And so we are so excited to have you today because you have a long-lived passion for coffee, and it has helped us bring Premier Coffee to market. And we'd like to discuss its attributes and your opinion on all that.
So I think a brief introduction is probably in order. So yes, I am Nathan Dodge. I'm the Research and Development Manager here at Premier Research Labs. When I was brought on board here, I really did not know that we would be doing anything in the world of coffee, but I'm excited that we are because, as Jen mentioned, that is a major passion of mine and has been for many years. I started out as a chemist by training. I'm a chemist and chemical engineer, and I got interested in coffee at a very young age in terms of drinking coffee. But at that point, it was Folgers because, well, that was what my father drank. And so I didn't know great coffee for a very, very long time. But later in my life, as I was working in industry, I ended up getting involved with actually a gentleman whose company owned a series of plantations in Colombia that produced specialty grade coffee. And in working with him and his team, I started getting involved in more than just the chemical analysis of coffee, but actually started getting very interested in the roasting of coffee and all of those things that go with that. And I eventually started to look into training with the Specialty Coffee Association of America. And through that group, I became qualified to grade coffee. And in addition, I had been doing some work as a consultant in the coffee industry. So all of this prior to my joining any team here at Premier Research Labs. And once I was brought on board here and we started talking a little bit about the coffee that Premier Research Lab had offered in years past, the thought was raised, maybe we should look into doing coffee again. And so using my knowledge and the wonderful team we have here at Sourcing Experts, we were able to go ahead and find a coffee that met our rigorous internal standards that we have here, plus some of my own personal standards on coffee to make sure that it met all of the Specialty Coffee Association's requirements.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about what went into creating Premier Coffee and how it's unique and different from other coffees available.
Sure. So one of the most important parts of the world of specialty coffee, one of the aspects that needs to be highlighted is that specialty coffee, generally speaking, is in the top roughly 10 to 15% of beans that are grown in the world. And so this means that there's stringent quality aspects that are being applied to the coffees. They have to meet certain quality requirements as green coffees. And in addition, then the roasting process that they undergo has to meet a certain level of quality as well. So the provisions that are governed by the Specialty Coffee Association, essentially, though they are not absolutely requiring coffees to be organic and fair trade, the organic and fair trade coffees are really specific to the specialty coffee market. So those are the growers, the producers who are trying to go above and beyond to produce a truly exceptional product. And through our sourcing and some of these sources that I had known from the past, we were able to find a coffee that I really enjoy drinking. It is wonderful coffee that's grown in Ethiopia in the Guji region. Guji being a very historically renowned area for high quality coffees, as well as heirloom varieties that have been grown for centuries.
Fascinating.
And so we were able to source this wonderful coffee. We were able to find a fantastic roaster who was able to roast it to the specifications that we had for it. And so we were able to produce really essentially a signature coffee. Our roast level on this bean is entirely unique to us with that roaster. They roast other beans, they do roast the same beans, but they're all at different levels for their wider consumption. But we have a very specific roast level that we were looking to in order to maximize both the flavor profile and the health.
Amazing. And so there seems to be a lot of discussion about interest in green coffee versus black or roasted coffee beans. Do you mind discussing a little bit about what the chemistry differences are between unroasted or green coffee beans and roasted coffee beans?
Absolutely, absolutely. So green coffee have been really in the know for a while in the supplement and nutraceuticals industry. But green coffee typically, at least in its majority share, I will call it, within the supplement market, has always been used for extractions. So essentially, it's been used to extract caffeine. So it's green coffee extract. Well, green coffee extract is very heavily composed of caffeine, especially if it's a water-based extract. Now, again, you can extract some of the other compounds out of the green bean using those same extraction processes, but some of those processes are really just not, in my opinion, at least perfectly safe. You're dealing with solvent-based extractions when you're looking at things other than just the caffeine extraction. So some of these solvents can be very harsh. Some of them can actually have deleterious effects on the human body. And again, knowing your sourcing, knowing who's doing these extractions, knowing the quality levels, that's so important if you're ever going to buy something like that, to make sure that when you're getting there, it's a quality product. So in terms of the green coffee, yes, green coffee has its place. But one of the things that makes roasted coffee extremely different from the green coffee is the sheer number of chemical compounds that occur. And really, most of the beneficial compounds in coffee are found primarily in the roasted form. And this is not just because so many of these compounds are formed during the roasting process, but because they're also in that formation or in that roasting situation, they're liberated from being bound up by other chemical complexes within the coffee bean itself.
So roasting seems to unlock a lot of the health benefits.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your major short chain fatty acids are essentially created during the roasting process, and will break down the long scale carbohydrates, which are then oxidized during that roasting process, and then made available to extraction in the water that you're going to use to brew.
Are there any possible adverse outcomes from drinking green coffee, or is it strictly used in the natural products industry as an extract substrate?
So I have heard of its use as a drink itself. And while, again, there's definitely safe ways to do this, the major problem with green coffee is that an unroasted green coffee is going to still be essentially an agricultural product. And therefore, agricultural products do not have to meet the same strict safety standards as consumable foods do. So an unroasted coffee is going to still have other plant material on it. It could have pathogenic bacteria or viruses present on the surface, and it could have mycotoxins from fungus that grows. And especially you're dealing with coffee, and coffee is a fermented product in terms of when the coffee is actually picked from the cherry and they peel off the skin, or in some cases leave the skin on. If it's a natural process, it undergoes a fermentation process. And so this fermentation is bacterial and fungal in nature. And the problem with most of these fungal, we'll say this, in terms of the mycological aspect, the fungus that often will live on the surface of the cherry or on the surface of the bean itself can produce toxins. Now we're talking about aflatoxins here. Aspergillus is present essentially everywhere, so you're going to find it on coffee beans. And if it has produced that toxin and the coffee bean is not then roasted to break down those toxins, you're getting essentially a full dose of whatever toxins are there present on the green coffee. The roasting process reduces that immensely. Now, again, it doesn't completely eliminate the threat of mycotoxins. Some of them can be very, very heat tolerant, but that high roasting temperature really does essentially take them down to such a low level that, again, it allows coffee to be a consumable product. And there's a great deal of testing in the literature showing that coffee that is roasted does not provide a significant amount of mycotoxins to the human diet.
Well, that's a relief, and knowing that such precautions and care is taken in the selection of the beans, as well as how it's roasted and how it can best deliver its health benefits. Do you mind highlighting for us some of the most, what you consider to be some of the most important chemical compounds and their health benefits that they get? Coffee is known to be quite antioxidant. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So coffee produces the coffee plant itself within its seed and a cherry. So the seed is contained within the fruit, the cherry of the coffee. It produces a great deal of antioxidants. Of course, primarily coffee is known as a source of caffeine, let's face it. And caffeine itself is actually one of the most well-studied compounds in health scientific literature. It has a number of amazing health effects in and of itself. Again, coffee and caffeine should be taken in moderation. There's always a limit. You always want to be careful of that. But caffeine itself, again, it can increase alertness and performance. It is very, very well recognized for that purpose. And again, that's the reason most people consume it. But it actually has interesting effects at some of the other systems in the body. For example, the dopamine system, and also including the upper acetylcholine system. And this is where a lot of the newer research in terms of caffeine has moved in terms of treatment for neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. There's a great deal of research that's active in that arena right now. And so caffeine is definitely being highlighted to a great deal. Now, again, this is just one of the many compounds in coffee, but it is the most prevalent, or rather at least is the most well recognized. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that first before we move into some of the other compounds. But when we start talking about antioxidant compounds, then we start talking about compounds like the chlorogenic acids. Now, chlorogenic acid is a catch-all, but there's quite a few of those within coffee. The term chlorogenic acid to most chemists is going to specifically refer to 3-caprylquinic acid, which again is just one of many of these subtypes. All of the, as they're named, these chlorogenic acids, though, have a number of effects that are typically attributed to their antioxidant profile. So they can modulate lipid and glucose metabolism. They also can induce, as it's known for antioxidant levels, they can reduce the oxidative stress on the body, specifically in the liver. A great deal of the scientific literature currently looking at these compounds looks at inflammation markers within the liver. There's also triganoline, which is known as a niacin or vitamin B3 derivative. The interesting thing about triganoline actually is that it is an antioxidant compound also that works again for neurodegenerative diseases. So in a number of studies, they have shown again a very highly protective mechanism from triganoline, which again is very responsible for some of the other compounds that occur in coffee. So essentially during the reactions that occur during roasting, it acts as really a co-reagent in some of these reactions to help form other active compounds in the coffee. So it's active in and of itself, but it's also responsible for forming other compounds that are also beneficial to continuing the consumption of coffee.
That's fascinating, especially hearing the science behind what we know of coffee and its constituents to be so enhancing mental alertness and cognitive.
Certainly. In addition, coffee produces a number of compounds that are very, very unique to coffee itself. Things that you really won't find in any other plant on your own. So one of these is capistol. Capistol is actually it's a terpene. And there's been a great deal of research recently into terpenes. You hear that mostly, though, in terms of cannabis. You know, you hear people looking into the terpenes in cannabis and the beneficial effects they have. Well, again, coffee has some unique terpenes as well. It actually has two very specific ones. One of them is tapistol, the other is caveol. And these are essentially some of the oil-soluble components, the more hydrophobic components. So you won't find these in a filtered coffee as much. If you filter your coffee, these compounds essentially get bound up in the filter. If you do something like a French press, if you do espresso roast, or if you do the traditional preparation of coffee, which is essentially to steep it directly in water, you'll actually find a much higher concentration of the diterpenes. And these increase cholesterol synthesis. That could be considered a double-edged sword, obviously, for those people who have hypercholesterolemia. But it also has very, very highly potent anti-carcinogenic and neuroprotective properties. So if it's your inclination to drink a French press coffee or an espresso, keep in mind, you will be reaping the benefits of these compounds as well.
That's nice to know that less equipment is more sometimes.
Yes, definitely. And again, from a perspective of those who drink coffee, and I'm a heavy coffee drinker, I like to do essentially a little bit of everything. I will some days have a French press, other days I'll do espresso, some days I do filter coffee. One of the newer modes of preparing coffee is a steepable tea. So essentially, the coffee is put into a filter bag, like a steepable bag for tea, and you steep your coffee. And then when you're ready and it's steeped to your desired taste, you can just take that bag out and don't throw it away. Don't throw it away. You can take it out of the coffee and then save those grounds for your garden.
Right.
But yes, you can take it out and then you have your coffee, and it was as easy to make as making a bag of tea. And again, with that kind of coffee, because it's being steeped and those bags typically have a slightly more porous structure, you're still getting these diterpenes, the capistol and caveol, in your steeped coffee. So again, you can reap those same benefits at very convenient. So one of the more popular compounds that I've been seeing more and more in the literature these days are the melanoidins. And again, it's another catch-all term because there are so many different melanoidins in coffee. It is absolutely crazy. And again, these compounds are formed during the roasting only. So you're really not getting any melanoidins in green coffee at all. But the melanoidins give a lot of the flavor and color to coffee. In fact, they're primarily responsible for that wonderful dark brown color that you get in the coffee. But unlike a lot of melanoidins that are found in other highly heated products, so think baked goods, the melanoidins found in coffee actually have interesting beneficial effects. So a lot of the things that you'll get in your baked goods, the melanoidins that you have in your baked goods are going to have some deleterious functions in the human body. One of the things that we find is that they increase what are known as AGEs, advanced glycation end products in the body. But the melanoidins that are found in roasted coffee actually have anti-glycative effects. So it seems like they work in the opposite, and it has to do simply just with the difference in the structure and the way that the structure bonds to the receptors in the body, especially in the liver. So again, very interesting compounds, and there are so many of them, it's almost impossible to get a full list, but these only will occur in roasted coffee.
And does this specific compound have even more distinct health benefits?
Yes, so melanoidins are also antioxidant in general. Very, very potent in some cases. It just depends on which melanoidins you're finding. And again, there's so many of them that you can take a coffee roasted at one level, and then you can roast that same coffee at a different level, and you'll actually find a different composition of melanoidins. So generally speaking, we look at an overall picture of the melanoidins versus very specific ones, but you can get very detailed through things like chromatographic analysis. You can actually separate out the melanoidins into the series and see exactly which ones you are finding in your coffee.
And I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but was there any information on this particular compound having chelating effects or any kind of extra detoxifying properties? And is that via drinkable coffee?
So when you find compounds like this, and the structure here that I'm showing is representative of most of the melanoidins. But these can actually act very similarly to chelating agents that you'll find in common use, things like EDTA, for example. But this is a very natural product as opposed to EDTA, much lower toxicity than things like EDTA. And so, yes, melanoidins have been found to actually chelate heavy metals. There is some active research going on right now into using them for that purpose. So that's something that I think everyone would like to watch with great interest.
True. And so, from what I understand about coffee, there are a couple of different distinct species or types of beans. And can you say a little bit more about what went into the selection of the Guji?
Sure. So the Specialty Coffee Association really only recognizes one species of coffee as specialty coffee, and that is Coffea arabica. So if you are buying specialty coffee, you are getting 100% arabica as its termed bean. Now, there are several other species that are found frequently, and probably the most prevalent is Coffea canephora, which is often referred to in the sort of the general parlance. That would be and here is generally speaking how if we were going to be doing a coffee business, this is like the way you want to move for coffee. I didn't say anything to everything, that was just a general presentation. This is the last slide I want to create, except the one that you provided.
The flyer one.
Flyer for coffee.
Great, great.
The sourcing and how specialty coffee is 100% arabica. And the other commonly cultivated species is Coffea canephora, which is often referred to as Robusta in the market. And actually, the production of Robusta, it has grown exponentially over the last few years, primarily in Southeast Asia. And in typical espresso blends, which is why they're a blend, you never get a Specialty Coffee Association graded espresso blend. Again, you're getting a single origin only. So blends, they bring together beans of different origins. For espresso, you typically have a little bit of Robusta because it has a little bit stronger, more acrid taste. And it provides a little extra caffeine because it's just higher in caffeine than the Arabica beans are. But again, it's got a more astringent taste to it. Typically speaking, it bears roasting at a higher temperature. So your espresso is, you end up roasting the bean to a true dark roast. And not that dark roast isn't bad by any means. It's simply not the flavor profile some people would like. And it's also not typically appropriate for the majority of the health benefits. Because again, with roasting, and the Specialty Coffee Association has for years recommended a true medium roast for grading of coffee. With a medium roast, you typically get the best flavor and benefits in combination. If you move to a darker roast, you're heating the beans so much that you're actually breaking down a lot of the beneficial compounds. Conversely, if you stick to the lighter roast, which has become very popular, people really like the more acidic taste of a light roast, but you're also not getting quite all of those compounds that you'd like to form. And perhaps more importantly, you're getting a very acidic experience. So for people who have hyperacidity, gastric hyperacidity, and people who have other digestive issues, a lighter roast may not necessarily be appropriate. So moving it a little darker toward that medium, in most cases, I assume typically tends to provide a little bit more comfortable experience for those people who have gastric upset from coffee.
And so Premier Coffee, that is a single source bean and strain, and it is organically cultivated and fair trade.
Yes. So ours is again, as I said before, it's an Ethiopian heirloom varietal from the Guji region, which again is a very well recognized region of coffee cultivation. So it's single sourced, it is organic certified, it is fair trade. We wanted to make sure we were providing the absolute best coffee that we could. And again, roasting it to a level that we felt most appropriate for the most health benefits, as well as the best flavor for all of PRL's customers, so that everyone can have the best coffee experience possible. And I do highlight a few things here in what I would call the optimal coffee experience that people should just bear in mind when buying coffee, when drinking coffee, that choosing 100% Arabica beans whenever possible, because again, that is going to be higher quality than your Robusta beans. Choosing a medium roast whenever possible, again, as I explained, because it's sort of, again, it's the Goldilocks of coffee, right?
Yes.
It's just right, baby bear.
Mhm.
And whenever possible, choose organic and fair trade. And I just say that from an ethical standpoint, it is always best to choose organic and fair trade whenever you can.
Absolutely.
So again, simply put, know the origin, the roast, and the quality of your coffee. And here at PRL, we know the origin, we dictate the roast, and we control the quality.
Premier quality again and again. Thanks so much, Nathan.
Well,
We
thank
learned
you.
so much today, and I can't wait to brew out some Premier coffee.
Excellent. I'll join you for that, Teddy.
Wonderful.
Thank you.